Hello there, fellow Earthlings. My name is Rogan, and you are watching The Mysterious Stoner in Ebola. Today, we are looking at one of the most classical Old Testament Bible stories and tearing it limb from limb. So, without any further ado, let's dive into the story of almost said Adam, Abraham sacrificing his son Isaac. Now, obviously, I have skipped over some things here. Some events have occurred that, because I'm not going in chronological, well, I am going in chronological order. I'm just not covering all the stories because there's not necessarily something really essential or necessary to learn from some of these. They're just things that supposedly happened along with the story. Nothing major, or sometimes not even talking to God, just some interactions and nothing overly serious. But over the past, with Abraham and his wife Sarah, they haven't had any children between each other. They're married. They're also half sister. Well, they have the same father but different mother, I believe. I might be wrong about that. I discussed it in one of the earlier videos. But point being, they're half siblings. I don't know if that has anything to do with them not being able to have children, but they're both very old at this point, and God has promised Abraham a child, and specifically through Sarah. And complications and a long time later, eventually she does have a child with Abraham, and it's wonderful, whoop-de-doo, and his name is, of course, Isaac. But we come to the part of the story here where God comes to Abraham, and he says, "Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I shall tell thee of." This is the same son that God promised to Abraham and Sarah, and who this couple had a very difficult time. Well, they had a really hard time making this come about, but it finally happened, and now God wants Abraham to go kill him. You know, you would think any loving parent, especially one who has wanted their child for so long, would put up a bit of a fuss. You would think. But there's no mention of that here at all. The very next verse. "And Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass." That's a very old word for donkey, actually. "Saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him," his servants, that is, "and Isaac his son, and clave the wood," or chopped up the wood, "for the burnt offering, rose up, and went unto the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes, and saw the place afar off." I wonder why God wanted Abraham to take Isaac so far away. I wonder why he didn't say, "Do it right here in front of your tent, in front of all your servants and your wife watching. I want everyone to see your faith in me, your obedience." But no, he wanted him to travel 3 days worth in some random, unspecified direction into the mountains to do this. I find that a bit peculiar. I mean, perhaps they were in a place where there were other people around, and God didn't want other people seeing Abraham about to perform a human sacrifice. That might not have been acceptable. That might have been too inhumane for other humans. because most humans have the common fucking sense to understand that human sacrifice is stupid. But this was a long time ago, and some civilizations were into it. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Oh my. No, Isaac has not been informed at this point. Apparently, he's been told they're going to sacrifice an animal to God, or at least that's what he's been led to believe. Some people think that he was a teenager or a bit older, to where he was able to understand and believe Abraham's word, and that Abraham actually told him more, to where Isaac agreed to go along with it and let his father kill him. But thinking about it here, if we just take what we've got right here in the Bible, see, with other people talking about, oh, Isaac was probably a teenager and probably knew what was going on and probably agreed to go along with Abraham. No. None of that is here. None of that is here. All we have is that Isaac is in the dark still as to what's about to go on. And they came to a place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. Now, if Isaac doesn't know what's going on, couldn't he start to put two and two together when his father starts tying him up? Wouldn't that seem like a bad idea to Isaac? Wouldn't Isaac start to struggle? Wouldn't he try to get away? But, oh no, another excuse is made here. Abraham is an old man here, supposedly. Well, I mean, he is. I believe he's in his 80s or 90s at this point, but he's still capable of climbing mountains and, well, we know how old man sperm works. It works for a very, very, very long time. But supposedly he's an old man and he wouldn't be able to stop and contain Isaac and keep him from escaping. That's what I was told. He would be too old for that. And so I was taught that Isaac had to be older and he must have been compliant with this. But that information is not here. We do not know what physical condition Abraham was in. We don't know how physically fit he was. It does not say how old Isaac was. It never says that Abraham actually told the truth to Isaac. I mean, the way I'm seeing it here, from what we are given, Abraham says to Isaac, yeah, the Lord's going to provide his own lamb. And then they get there, and then, just imagine being little Isaac, and your dad starts tying you up, and you're like, Dad, what are you doing? And, like, I can imagine that just Isaac trying to get away, screaming, being scared, Abraham restraining him. Why would they put that in the Bible if that's how it went? Wouldn't that be a bit embarrassing? Wouldn't that be wouldn't people be concerned for Isaac? Wouldn't they think that this seems rather traumatic? There's nothing given here as to how Isaac reacts to being tied up by his father and laid on an altar to be killed, and seeing the knife being raised to kill him. We don't know if he is scared, if he's compliant, if he is shitting his loincloth. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And Abraham, still with knife raised in the air, says, Here I am. And the Lord said, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him, for now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. So, you see what happened there? Supposedly, God called out to Abraham right before Abraham was going to kill his son. Poor traumatized Isaac. You know, even if you were a teenager, I mean, I would be shitting my pants too. And well, with how my parents raised me, I probably would have been compliant too. There's a possibility. That's how strictly I was raised. But God calls out to Abraham and says, "Stop! Don't kill him." But because you've done this, you've gone through so far with it, all the way up to this point. It's okay. I believe you, that you have faith in me, and you have really proven yourself. Good job, Abraham. I'm really gonna bless the living fuck out of you. And lo and behold, God does supposedly let a lamb or ram from the wild get caught in some bushes nearby, and Abraham and Isaac kill that instead, offering it to God, and yes, they all went and lived happily ever after. God continued to bless them, and so on and so forth. Yay! What a wonderful example of God's faith. Abraham's faith. Being willing to murder his own child because a voice in his head told him to do so. Here's what I think may have actually happened, and is probably a lot more likely. Going back to the, I have one theory where, in regarding to Abraham being a scammer and everything, continuing that up, I think it's quite possible that Isaac was indeed a teenager and perhaps was old enough to start taking part in the family business. You see, back then, manhood started at 13. I mean, yes, that's when puberty starts, and that's how a lot of people back in those days treated it. Or you're growing up, your dick's getting hard, you got pimples and shit, you're old enough to start doing things that men are doing. And that's not too terrible. Well, obviously, I wouldn't say they should be doing everything that men do, but there wasn't as big of a distinction between men and teens back then. You were a boy, and then you were a man. So this may have been around when Isaac was becoming that age. And a lot of the times, when you get that age, you would start taking part in the family craft, or some sort of, family business. You would become an apprentice of some kind, perhaps. Different eras of history do it differently, but this was even further back, and this wouldn't be too unusual. Abraham, I think he may have been experimenting with drugs. It's possible for some of the things, but I think he was also a scammer, the way he treated the two kings, Pharaoh and then the king Abimelech, by getting a bunch of shit from them, and then not getting punished for it for some strange fucking reason. But then he goes and does this. I feel like it's possible that Abraham had a small circle of people that knew that he was a scammer, and then he had people who were helping him with the scam. Well, they were, they were probably the ones in the circle, but then probably I'm thinking he had an even smaller circle that he was including of just family, and they were in on the religion being fake. Could have been just him. I'm going to, well, I don't know. It could have been him and Isaac, or could have been just him. Either way, and I feel like he influenced all his people because he had everyone circumcise themselves. I'm pretty sure that was his idea. He's also he has a kink for genital mutilation. It's a thing. You can Google it. And so here, what I'm thinking is that Abraham is taking Isaac out into the mountains, and whatever the hell he's doing, he made up this entire story to cover whatever he actually did with Isaac. Maybe he let him in on the family secrets and had him told him, look, we've got this religion thing going, and we're scammers. This is what we do. This is how we live, and you're going to be part of this now. Maybe that's what he did. Maybe I have another possible theory of how it could have happened. You notice it says at the beginning that he took 2 servants with him. They had a donkey to carry supplies, and then they had 2 men servants with them, which I find rather interesting. See, they could have taken the donkey with them to the sacrifice, to the place where they were going to make the sacrifice, if it was just Abraham and Isaac. But they take 2 men servants with him, and then they leave the 2 men servants and the donkey behind and leave and go off together, just the 2 of them. I mean, if that's how it happened, I find that rather suspicious. It's a father and son alone time. Anything could go down. They could agree on any kind of lie of what happened. He could have raped his son for all we know, and if you know anything about those unfortunate category of victims, a lot of the times they keep their mouths shut for a very long time and go along with whatever the rapist told them, threatened them with, whatever. But let's say something according to what Abraham tells here, or the Bible tells here, actually went down. Alright, they had 2 men staying behind with a donkey. Don't know why they couldn't watch, why they couldn't be in on it. Don't know why they had to be there. Guards, because Abraham was partly well off, maybe. Well, bandits usually work in pretty decent numbers, so I'm thinking they would have taken more if they were really that concerned about trouble. So I'm thinking from the point where they leave the 2 men and the donkey behind, they go on, and I think one of the guys stayed with the donkey, and then the other guy, the other servant, knew where Adam was knew where Abraham was taking his son. You see where I'm going with this, aren't you? Abraham takes Isaac to the place, wherever the sacrifice is going to happen. It doesn't even specify that it's a mountaintop. Just, it's somewhere up in the mountains. Apparently the place was already picked out. Let's say they get there, and Abraham tells him, God will provide himself a lamb. Don't worry about it. They get there. Maybe both servants. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know how they could have pulled it off, but maybe somehow one of the servants, they left the other servant with the donkey, showed up and was there, and he played the voice of God. He made the God voice, so that Isaac could be convinced that God was speaking to Abraham. Who knows what kind of devices they could have had? Who knows how advanced they were? If we're going by what real archaeology has discovered, people had some level of technology back then, rather advanced even. Some even had batteries, which means they had ways of using batteries. So who knows what could have been possible far back in these old times. And something I was told growing up, and there's probably a verse for it somewhere. In fact, I'm pretty sure there is. I'm going to look it up and put it here on the screen. But there's a verse that says that God knows our very thoughts. That basically he can read our minds. He knows what we're thinking. So he knows, if he's real, he knows how we feel towards him, how loyal we are or how disloyal. But here, God apparently doesn't seem to know that. Abraham does not question God asking him to sacrifice, kill his own son. He doesn't question that. He doesn't argue. He doesn't resist. That's not natural. Okay, that's not normal of a human being. If you have no problem killing your child in the name of God, you're very brainwashed. If there is anything that makes you okay with killing your child, and your child doesn't deserve it, and it's not going to serve any, there's no other reason other than it's going to make God happy, you have a sick God if that is what he is asking you to do. Just saying. But that aside, supposedly this God is supposed to know what you're thinking. He's supposed to know how loyal and faithful you are. So, not only, God isn't just happy that Abraham jumps up the next morning to go kill his son. He's not just happy when Abraham gets to the location 3 days later. He's not just happy when Abraham ties up his son. He's not just happy when Abraham lays his son, possibly kicking and screaming, very likely crying, absolutely guaranteed to be terrified, on the altar. No, he waits all the way until Abraham raises the fucking knife. He couldn't read Abraham's thoughts and intentions by then. He couldn't see into the future, even though he's supposed to be able to. He couldn't tell that Abraham would be able to do this without having to traumatize Isaac. I'm telling you, that would be fucking traumatizing. I don't need a doctorate in psychology to know that that would be traumatizing for a child or a teenager or a full-grown adult. That it was completely unnecessary. If God is so all-knowing, then this was a complete waste of time. But no. Apparently, God needed to see it. He just had to see it happen. He just... Was he rubbing one out to this? Or... Oh my God. It's a messed up God. And Abraham is a messed up individual for being completely okay with this. And it says, the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time, and said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. And God goes on and on and on. Like, oh my God, why does it sound like a guy just got off to a really beautiful woman and he's making all these promises if she'll stay with him? Like, it's rather sickening. Like, oh, you just made me so happy by traumatizing your son and nearly killing him for me. I'm going to make you so rich and happy because you made me so happy. Oh yes, I'm going to make you so fucking happy. You're going to kill a bunch of people in my name. Oh, fuck yes. He is a sick fucking deity if he is a real deity. Which, of course, I say he is not. The most I could say is that Jehovah was a fucking alien. That's as far as I'll go. As far as possibilities. But no fucking way is he a god. An all-knowing, perfect, loving God. Because this is wrong. No benevolent human being would do this to their own child unless they are greatly psychologically fucked up in the head. But that's who I used to believe in and used to pray to, and yes, and I used to think of Abraham as some great father of faith because, oh yes, nearly forgot to mention in the New Testament, there's a verse that actually adds a little bit a bit of light on here. Funny that it's not here in the Old Testament, but it says in the New Testament that supposedly Abraham had faith that if he did end up killing his son, it is said in the New Testament that Abraham had faith that God would raise him back from the dead and give him back to Abraham. Really? So, if I was a supreme fucked up deity that really wanted to prove the fuck out of my existence to people on Earth, what would be the ultimate form of proof that you could give? I would say killing someone and then bringing them back to life. Like clinically ixnay on the hyena. And then me bringing them back to life. But God just did all this just to test Abraham. He didn't actually feel like raising Isaac from the dead, apparently. Because Abraham was right there. He was ready to go. And God was like, you know what? I've lost it. I've lost my boner. I'm not feeling this. Good job. And you know, I just don't feel like raising anyone from the dead today. I'm sorry. You know what? You're gonna have to go without it. Good job. I'm glad you proved yourself to me, but I'm just not feeling it today. Sorry. Why? If you have unlimited power and you really want to make someone believe in you, why wouldn't you do something so spectacular, so phenomenal? It's like, if you kill him, I will bring him back to life for you. Why would you stop them from going through with it? Why wouldn't you want to raise them from the dead? That would just increase their faith in you. Instead of stopping them, it's like, you know what, you have faith in me. That's good enough. That's good enough. You've really proven it to me. I'm glad you're willing to kill your son in my name, but you don't actually have to do it because I actually can't bring him back from the dead. Perhaps that's why. Perhaps there was a servant calling out, "Hey, don't kill your son. Your only son." Oh, it's God speaking. You hear that, Isaac? It's God speaking. Yeah, that's probably what happened. So, in conclusion, whatever happened here in this story, I don't think it actually happened like it says it did. Just my personal opinion on the matter. If you're offended by it, well, tough shit. But I hope that I have caused you to question these sorts of things, because... But I hope that I have caused you to question these sorts of things, because it's important. I don't care if you've been believing this your whole life. I believed this sort of thing until I was in my early 20s. I have a whole video series about my upbringing, what I was taught to believe, some of the specifics, and how I was raised, where I've travelled abroad, and how I've ended up where you see me at right here. And I'm telling you, I've learned the hard way that the God of the Bible is not a real individual. So, I challenge you to think more carefully about what you read and what you allow other people to tell you in regards to what to believe. If you found this video educational or entertaining in any sort of form, I hope you will leave a like. If you have questions, feel free to ask in the comments section, and subscribe if you haven't. There's plenty more videos to come. I am going through the entire Bible, and there are even more things to come after that. And so until next time, my friends, stay safe and farewell.